The air in Los Angeles that morning carried the kind of brightness that feels wrong for a funeral. Sunlight dripped over the white stone walls of St. Mark's Chapel, catching on the stained glass until even the shadows looked polished. Inside, the pews were filled with voices lowered to whispers, the rustle of black fabric, the occasional clink of rosary beads against a wooden bench. I stood near the front, one hand resting on the polished coffin, where my wife, Margaret, lay beneath the satin lining. 42 years of marriage and still, in this moment, I felt as if I had not said enough to her. I was a retired architect trained to make buildings stand straight. Roofs hold steady. Spaces hold life. Yet nothing in me could design a blueprint strong enough to keep Margaret here. David, my eldest, took the podium first. He wore a black suit too sharp for sincerity, his voice controlled, almost rehearsed. He spoke of his mother's patience, her discipline, her belief in family values. He did not cry. My daughter Claire followed, trembling as she read a poem Margaret had loved in college. Her words cracked once, then steadied, as though she had borrowed strength from the paper itself. Afterward, people came with condolences, shaking my hand, repeating the same two sentences in different tones. She was remarkable. She will be missed. I nodded until my neck stiffened. Grief has a way of numbing you, but betrayal cuts through like a cold wind. I felt the first chill when David leaned in. His whisper too pointed for a son comforting his father. "Dad," he said, "you can't stay in that Pasadena house alone. It's too big, too dangerous." I stared at him. The funeral wasn't even over, and already he was measuring the walls of my life. Claire, soft-eyed as always, joined us later in the reception hall. Her tone was gentler, but the message was the same. "It's not just about safety, Dad. The house is heavy with memories. You'd be better with us in Santa Monica. I have the basement suite ready." The words landed like stones. Basement. A space for storage, not for living. My life reduced to something tucked under their feet. I excused myself, stepping into the church courtyard where the roses were in full bloom. The scent should have been comforting, but it only reminded me of Margaret's hands pruning the garden behind our home. Her laughter, when I planted things crooked. For a moment, I wondered if grief was making me paranoid, if I was misreading my children's concern. But then David joined me again, this time with his wife Naomi at his side. She placed a hand on his arm, eyes sharp and assessing, like she was already deciding what drapes would suit my Pasadena living room. "Dad," David pressed, "we can help list the house quickly. Market's strong right now. You could use the money for assisted living, maybe somewhere closer to us." Assisted living. The phrase stung. I was 68. Not broken. I hiked the hills every morning. I still drafted designs when younger architects asked for guidance. Margaret's death had cut me open. Yes. But grief was not incompetence. I smiled faintly. The kind of smile people mistake for agreement. "Let's talk later, David," I said, and walked back inside. That evening, when the house was finally silent, I sat at my desk in the study. Margaret's favorite lamp, with its stained glass shade, threw circles of warm light on the oak surface. That was when I saw it, a sealed envelope tucked under her old leather-bound journal. My name, written in her neat handwriting, stared back at me. I picked it up, my hands trembling, my heart pounding harder than it had all day. I didn't open it yet. Instead, I held it close, breathing in the faint trace of lavender she always used to press into stationery. Something in me knew this envelope was more than words of farewell. Margaret had always been practical, meticulous, a woman who anticipated storms before the first cloud gathered. She must have left me something: directions, instructions, maybe even protection. I set it back on the desk, unopened, a promise to myself that I would face it when the noise of the day settled. For now, I looked around the house that carried our life in its walls, family photos, the lemon tree just outside the kitchen window, The faint hum of pipes, she always said, reminded her of music. David wanted to erase this house. Claire wanted me under her roof. But I knew, deep in the marrow of my bones, that Margaret had not left me defenseless. The funeral had ended. The betrayal had begun. The first week after Margaret's funeral blurred together. Friends brought casseroles I could not taste. Neighbors stopped by with flowers that wilted before I remembered to put them in water. Nights were worse. The bed half empty. Her side untouched like an accusation. By Friday, I was almost grateful when the doorbell rang, breaking the silence. I opened it to find David standing there in a navy blazer, Naomi on his arm, and behind them my stomach dropped a woman in heels, carrying a leather portfolio. "Dad?" David said brightly, too brightly. "This is Sophie. She's with Horizon Realty. She's going to take a quick look around." The audacity made my mouth dry. "A look around?" I repeated. Naomi stepped forward, voice syrupy. "We just thought, with everything you're going through, it might help to know your options. The market's incredible right now." I stared at them, then at Sophie, who was already glancing at the living room as if picturing furniture she could advertise. My hands tightened around the doorframe. "I didn't ask for this," I said evenly. David's smile thinned. "Dad, come on. We're trying to make things easier for you." Easier. The word felt like sandpaper. I stood aside, not to invite them in, but because fighting in the doorway felt undignified. Sophie clicked across the hardwood floors, making notes, asking questions I refused to answer. Naomi drifted to the kitchen, opening cabinets like she owned them. "You don't really need all this space, do you?" she mused. I looked at the lemon tree outside the window. The one Margaret and I had planted the year Claire was born. "Yes," I said simply. David muttered something under his breath about stubbornness. I let it slide. Some battles win themselves if you wait long enough. That night, I sat at my desk again, the unopened envelope still waiting. My hands shook as I slid it open. Inside was Margaret's handwriting, steady and deliberate. "Richard, if you are reading this, it means I am gone. Do not let grief make you careless. Go to Safe Deposit Box 317 at First Horizon Bank, Beverly Hills Branch. The key is taped to the back of this letter. Trust me, you will need what is inside." I turned the paper over. Sure enough, a small brass key was taped neatly. My breath caught. Margaret, always thinking ahead, always protecting us. The next morning, Claire called. Her voice was soft, coaxing. But beneath it, I heard the same urgency David carried. "Dad, you shouldn't be alone in Pasadena. That house, it's full of memories. Why don't you come live with me? The basement is ready. You'd have your own entrance." "Basement," I repeated. "It's just a word," she insisted. "You'd be safe. Close to me. Close to Emily." Emily. My granddaughter. Claire knew the name was a lever, but all I heard was confinement, a slow erasure of independence. Think about it," I said, though my decision was already made. That evening, David returned, angrier this time. He paced the living room like a man who believed he owned it already. "Dad, you're being unreasonable. This house is a liability. Taxes, maintenance, safety. Do you want to fall down the stairs and not be found for days?" I watched him, remembering the boy who once cried because the bat was too heavy for him in Little League. That boy had hardened into a man who confused control with care. "Manage," I said. "No, you won't," David snapped. "If you refuse to be practical, well, petition for conservatorship. You're not thinking clearly." The word hit like a slap. Conservatorship. My own children, planning to declare me incompetent. I steadied my breath. "If you think that's best, petition. But remember, judges prefer facts to feelings." For the first time, David faltered. His jaw worked, but no words came. Naomi touched his arm. whispering something I didn't catch. They left in a storm of perfume and slammed doors. When the house was quiet again, I pressed Margaret's letter to my chest. Tomorrow, I would go to Beverly Hills. Whatever she had hidden there, I needed it now. Because this was no longer just about grief. It was war, dressed in family clothing. Saturday morning arrived cold for Los Angeles standards. A pale marine layer pressing against the sky. I drove west toward Beverly Hills. Margaret's letter folded in my jacket pocket. The brass key digging into my palm, as if reminding me not to falter. First Horizon Bank stood like a marble fortress on Wilshire Boulevard, its tall glass doors guarded by 2 palm trees that had seen too many secrets pass through. I parked, sat for a moment with the engine running, and thought about Margaret's neat handwriting. She had known I would need this. She had known our children better than I wanted to admit. Inside, the air smelled of polished wood and disinfectant. A young clerk in a tailored suit greeted me with a smile that stopped short of his eyes. "How can I help you today, sir?" "Safe deposit box," I said, holding up the key. "Number 317. He checked his ledger, then led me to a quiet corridor lined with steel doors, each hiding stories people didn't trust their families with. He unlocked the vault, then stepped aside. "Take your time," he said, leaving me alone with the key and the silence. The brass slid into the lock with a weight that felt final. I pulled the box free and set it on the small table. My hands trembled as I lifted the lid. Inside lay a stack of documents, a folded photograph, and a sealed envelope marked in Margaret's careful block letters. "Read last." I reached for the documents first. They were deeds, official, notarized bearing my name and Margaret's. My eyes scanned the details and froze on the words, Vineyard Estate. Sonoma County, California. A vineyard. Margaret had purchased land in wine country, far from the noise of Los Angeles, far from the reach of David and Claire. The papers were clean, airtight, shielded by a trust Margaret had established 5 years earlier. A clause in the trust gave me full control, with a silent partner arrangement that ensured no outside sale could occur without my consent. Beneath the deeds was a ledger of expenses, taxes paid, improvements made, caretaking fees, all of it up to date. Margaret had been quietly nurturing this place for years, while I thought she was traveling for her women's book club retreats. I unfolded the photograph. It was of Margaret standing in front of a white stucco house with blue shutters and rolling vines behind her. She wore her wide-brimmed straw hat, the one she used in our Pasadena garden, and she was smiling, not the polite smile she wore at church events, but the private one, the smile she reserved for when she was exactly where she wanted to be. Finally, I opened the envelope marked "Read last." "Richard," she had written. I knew our children might one day confuse inheritance with entitlement. I could not stop them from being who they are, but I could give you a place where you are safe from their demands. This vineyard is ours, though I want you to see it as yours. Go there when the house in Pasadena becomes too heavy, when their voices become too loud. Rosa, the caretaker, is trustworthy. I told her everything. Trust her as you trusted me. She will help you keep what we built together. When you are ready, invite Emily. She deserves to inherit love, not greed. If you're reading this, it means you have already seen their hunger. Stand firm. You are not alone. I have already placed your name where it cannot be erased. Tears blurred the ink until the words swam. Margaret had known. She had looked past the smiles of our children and seen the calculation behind their eyes. She had prepared for this battle before I even realized it would come. I closed the box carefully, returned it to its slot, and walked back into the Los Angeles sunlight. The city noise felt different now, less threatening. In my pocket, I carried copies of the deeds, notarized proof of a life my children knew nothing about. Driving home, I imagined David's face when he discovered that not only could he not touch the Pasadena house, but there was another property larger, wealthier, untouchable that lay entirely beyond his grasp. I thought of Claire, torn between loyalty and survival, and wondered how long it would take her to realize she had been used as David's pawn. Back at the Pasadena house, I laid the documents on the dining table. Margaret's photograph stared up at me, her smile a quiet reminder. I whispered to the empty room, "I'll go, Margaret. I'll see it. I promise." That night, sleep came easier. Not because the grief was gone, but because I finally understood. Margaret hadn't left me only memories. She had left me a weapon. And soon, when David and Naomi came pressing again, I would be ready to use it. I didn't have to wait long before David made his move. 3 days after my trip to Beverly Hills, a letter arrived from the Los Angeles Superior Court. The words blurred as I read them, but the meaning was clear. Petition for conservatorship. David was asking a judge to declare me incapable of managing my own affairs. The betrayal tasted metallic in my mouth, like pennies held too long on the tongue. I sat at the dining table staring at Margaret's photograph, the vineyard smiling back at me, and I felt both fury and relief. Fury because my own son wanted to strip me of autonomy. Relief because Margaret had seen this day coming and armed me with protection. That evening, Claire came by. She hovered in the doorway, wringing her hands. "Dad, I didn't want it to go this far. David says it's for your safety. He says you're slipping." "Do you believe that?" I asked. Her eyes filled with tears. "No. But Naomi, she pushes him. And he listens." I sighed. "Then you'd better decide who you want to be, Claire. His echo or your own voice." She didn't answer. She kissed my cheek, her lips trembling, and left. The next morning, I called Elena Ruiz. She had been one of the sharpest attorneys I knew, back when I designed civic buildings and zoning boards tangled themselves in red tape. She answered on the second ring, her voice brisk, clipped. "Richard Hale," she said. "It's been a long time." "Elena," I said, "I need your help. My son is trying to take me to court." We met at her office in downtown La, a minimalist suite with floor-to-ceiling windows. She listened quietly as I explained everything: Margaret's funeral, the real estate agent, the threats, the petition. Finally, I slid the Vineyard Trust across her desk. She scanned the pages, her brows lifting. "Smart woman. You're Margaret. This deed is airtight. No conservator, no son, no scheming daughter-in-law can touch it." Her words steadied me. For the first time in weeks, I felt the floor under my feet. "Elena," I said, "David thinks he's 2 steps ahead, but I need to make sure he trips over his own lies." She smiled, a predator's smile. "Then let's prepare." Over the next 2 weeks, my house became a war room. I dug out every tax receipt, every insurance payment, every medical clearance from my doctor. Elena built a binder so thick it could have anchored a boat. Meanwhile, her investigator turned over stones in David's life, and what crawled out made my stomach twist. Gambling debts. Dozens of them. Private poker games in West Hollywood. Online accounts traced to offshore sites. He owed over $60,000 to a man named Leon the Shark Morales, a loan shark with broken knuckles to prove his nickname. Worse still, Naomi had been shopping for new homes in Brentwood, sending emails that assumed liquid assets from the sale of Pasadena. They were planning my erasure, already spending the spoils. One night, I sat at the kitchen table with Margaret's envelope and whispered, "You knew, didn't you? You always knew David's hunger would outgrow his conscience." The lemon tree outside swayed in the breeze, branches knocking the glass like an answer. The court date arrived gray and heavy, as if the city itself understood the gravity. I wore the navy suit Margaret had loved, my shoes polished until I saw my own reflection in them. Inside the courthouse, David stood tall beside Naomi, who wore a pearl necklace like armor. Their lawyer, a slick man with perfect hair, laid out their case. Richard Hale was grieving. Unstable, a danger to himself. He needed guardianship. they argued. For his own good. I sat silently, letting them spin their web. Then Elena rose. Calm. Sharp. Unshaken. She presented medical certificates proving my health. Photographs of my architectural projects still in progress. Financial records meticulously up to date. Each page she dropped onto the evidence table was a hammer, driving nails into their coffin. But the coup de grace was yet to come. Elena lifted the Vineyard Trust, held it high, and said, "Your Honor, what Mr. Hale's children fail to mention is that their father not only maintains his affairs, but also oversees a second property in Sonoma County. Deeds are current, taxes paid, and a caretaker employed. This is not incompetence. This is foresight." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Naomi's face drained of color. David shifted, jaw tightening, his entire argument collapsing under the weight of Margaret's planning. The judge leaned back, eyes hard. Petition denied. Case dismissed. Mr. Fordy. Hale. You are free to manage your affairs as you see fit. The gavel struck. David stormed out, Naomi chasing him. Claire stayed seated, her face buried in her hands, silent tears slipping between her fingers. I walked out of that courtroom taller than I had in years. Margaret had shielded me even from the grave. And I knew the next step was clear. It was time to see the vineyard with my own eyes. The echo of the gavel still rang in my ears as I stepped out of the courtroom. The marble hallway smelled faintly of bleach, the kind of sterile scent that clings to government buildings. My hands trembled, not from weakness but from the rush of release. For weeks, I had lived under the threat of being stripped of my dignity. Now, with a single strike, that weight had been lifted. David's footsteps thundered down the hall, Naomi clattering after him in her heels. "This isn't over, Dad," David hissed as he passed me, his face red, jaw tight. "You can't keep everything locked away forever." I didn't answer. Sometimes silence is the sharpest blade. Claire lingered behind, her eyes swollen from tears. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I didn't fight him hard enough." I touched her arm gently. "You still have time, Claire. Don't let Naomi's hunger swallow you whole." Elena walked beside me toward the elevators, her binder clutched under one arm. "You understand what just happened?" she said. "He underestimated you. He assumed grief meant weakness. You've still got teeth, Richard." I smiled faintly. I had Margaret's foresight. That's sharper than any lawyer's argument. That night, I sat at the Pasadena house with a glass of water, no wine, no whiskey, just clarity. On the table lay the vineyard documents, Margaret's letter, and the photograph of her smiling in the sunlit vines. I realized then that the court battle had only been the first storm. David wouldn't give up. Naomi wouldn't let him. They had debts, appetites, ambitions too large to simply walk away. The vineyard wasn't just a secret anymore. It was a sanctuary I needed to claim. I called Elena the next morning. "Can you arrange a caretaker introduction? The one Margaret trusted Rosa?" "I'll make the call," she said. "But Richard, be prepared. Seeing that place will stir ghosts." "I am ready for them," I said, though my chest tightened at the thought. 3 days later, I drove north along the Pacific Coast Highway, the ocean on my left flashing like hammered steel under the sun. With every mile, the city fell away, the noise thinning into stretches of silence, broken only by gulls and surf. It felt like Margaret was guiding me, her presence woven into the waves, into the endless sky. By evening, I pulled onto a winding road lined with vineyards that stretched like green quilts over rolling hills. Finally, I saw it. The white stucco house with blue shutters from the photograph. The vines rolled out behind it, heavy with late-season grapes, the air rich with the smell of earth and sun. A woman emerged from the porch, wiping her hands on a linen apron. She was in her late 50s, her hair streaked with gray, her posture sturdy as a pillar. "Mr. Mater." "Hale?" she called, her accent lilting with Spanish warmth. "Rosa?" I asked. She smiled, eyes soft with recognition. "Yes. I've been waiting. Margaret told me this day would come." Something in me broke then. My knees weakened. Not from age, but from the sudden crash of love and loss. Margaret had told this woman everything. She had trusted her with a secret part of our lives I hadn't even known existed. Rosa guided me inside. The house smelled of lavender and oak barrels, the walls lined with photographs of Margaret working among the vines. She had lived here in her own way, keeping a piece of herself alive beyond my sight. "She said you would need a place when your children forgot the meaning of family," Rosa said quietly, pouring me a cup of tea. "She said you would need land, not walls, roots, not chains." I stared at the steam curling from the cup. For the first time since Margaret's funeral, my lungs filled without strain. Later that night, I walked among the vines under the silver wash of moonlight. The leaves rustled like whispers. I felt Margaret everywhere in the soil, in the grapes, in the careful lines of trellises she had planned. The court battle was behind me, but the real war was ahead. David would not stop. Naomi would not sleep until they had something to show for their betrayal. But as I stood in that vineyard, the cool air brushing my face, I whispered into the night, "Come at me, David. You'll find I am not the broken man you imagined." The following week, I packed the Pasadena house with a deliberate calm. Not everything, just what mattered. Margaret's journals, the photograph of her in the vines, a box of letters we had written to each other during our first years of marriage. I left the silver, the furniture, the art David always bragged about to his friends. Those things could be fought over. What I carried was untouchable. I drove north again, this time with the car heavy with my life's essence. The freeway stretched ahead like a ribbon unraveling toward freedom. By the time I reached Sonoma, the late afternoon light painted the hills gold, and I felt my heartbeat slow to match the rhythm of the land. Rosa met me at the gates of the vineyard. "Welcome home, Mr. Foster." "Hail," she said. The word home struck me deep. For weeks, I had felt like a guest in my own house. Here, with Margaret's foresight, I was something else, an heir of her vision. The house was modest compared to the Pasadena estate, but alive in a way the old house had not been since Margaret's laughter left it. Windows opened onto rows of vines that seemed endless, their green lushness rolling down to the horizon. Rosa showed me the kitchen, the wine cellar, the small study Margaret had kept locked. When she opened the door, I nearly staggered. On the desk were Margaret's hand-drawn plans for the vineyard rows measured, irrigation mapped, harvest notes carefully penned. There were letters too, unsent but addressed to me, filled with her thoughts about this place. "One day you will walk these rows, Richard," she had written. "One day you will know this is what I wanted for us." I sank into the chair, tears pricking my eyes. "She built this for us," I whispered. Rosa nodded. She came often, sometimes for a day, sometimes a week, always planning, always planting. "She said you would need this after." That night, I slept in the master bedroom with the windows open. The night air carried the scent of earth and grapes, a grounding smell. For the first time since Margaret's funeral, I slept without waking in panic. In the days that followed, I learned the rhythm of the vineyard. Rosa introduced me to the small team who tended the vines: Miguel, a wiry man with hands hardened by pruning, and Elena, his daughter, who managed the books. They greeted me not as an intruder but as someone expected, someone rightful. Each morning, I walked the rows, touching the leaves, feeling the rough texture of bark under my fingers. Miguel explained the harvest cycle, the patience required. "The vine doesn't give because you demand," he said. "It gives when it's ready, when it's cared for." I thought of David demanding, pressing, taking without care. And I thought of Claire, pulled between two worlds. The metaphor was not lost on me. Letters from Los Angeles came quickly, David first, sharp and furious, accusing me of running away, of hiding assets that should have been family property. I didn't reply. Then Naomi wrote, her words sugar-coated but sour underneath. We're worried about you. The vineyard must be overwhelming. Maybe it would be best if we handled it for you. I smiled as I folded the letter. If only she knew the trust documents were ironclad. They couldn't touch an inch of soil here. But it wasn't just defense I was after. This vineyard was not a fortress, it was a rebirth. Margaret had left me not only protection but purpose. Each evening, Rosa and I sat on the porch, sipping tea as the sun sank behind the vines. She told me stories of Margaret walking barefoot in the soil, laughing that it made her feel young again. You carry her with you, Rosa said one night. But here, she carries you. Her words settled into me like roots. Still, the shadow of my children stretched north. A neighbor mentioned someone had been asking about the property, an unfamiliar man in a suit, taking photographs from the road. I knew immediately it was David's doing. He was circling, looking for weaknesses. I stood at the edge of the vineyard, the hills rolling endlessly, and whispered to the night sky, try. David, come and try. Because now, I wasn't just defending myself. I was defending Margaret's legacy. And I would not let them erase her gift. The first knock on the vineyard door came on a crisp Saturday morning. I opened it to find Claire standing there, her daughter Emily beside her. Claire's eyes were red. Her shoulders slumped as though she had walked miles rather than driven. Dad, she said softly, we need to talk. I let them in. Emily rushed into my arms, clinging with the desperation of a child who had been left too long in storms not of her making. She smelled of peppermint shampoo, and I held her tighter than I meant to. Over tea at the kitchen table, Claire twisted her wedding band, her voice trembling. David's angry, furious. He says you're hiding things. He wants to sell this place. He's talking to people, shady people. I know, I said, but this vineyard isn't his to touch. Claire swallowed hard. Naomi said, we needed money, that you'd already given us more than enough. She told me to take the money you sent Emily and put it toward bills. I thought I could replace it later. But Emily looked up, confused. What money? The room went silent. Claire's face drained of color. I turned to Emily gently. For 2 years, I sent you $500 a month. For school. For clothes. For whatever you needed. You never got it? Emily shook her head, tears brimming. Mom always said things were tight. She said you forgot about me. Claire broke then, sobs shaking her body. I didn't mean. Naomi told me it was practical. That you wouldn't notice. That Emily would be fine. I am so sorry. I reached across the table, covering Emily's hand with mine. You were never forgotten, I said firmly. And you never will be. Claire wept harder, whispering apologies. For the first time, I saw not the conspirator who stood beside David, but the daughter I once knew, trapped in her own weakness. Claire, I said quietly, betrayal doesn't happen in an instant. It happens in choices, little by little. But so does redemption. If you want to change, you can. But it has to start now. Emily leaned against me, her small frame trembling. Can I stay here with you sometimes, Grandpa? Yes, I said, my throat thick. This vineyard is as much yours as it is mine. Margaret wanted that. Claire looked at me through tears. She told you about this place, didn't she? I nodded. She left it to protect us, to protect Emily. That evening, as the sun sank behind the vines, Claire and Emily walked the rows with me. The light caught Emily's hair, and for a moment I saw Margaret's spirit in her, the same determination, the same spark. But the peace was short-lived. Later that week, Elena called. Richard, you should know David tried to file paperwork, claiming partial ownership of the Pasadena house. He even listed it as collateral for a loan. The bank flagged it because the conservation covenant makes the house unsellable. I clenched the phone. So he's digging himself deeper. Much deeper, Elena confirmed. And when it collapses, it'll be public. Very public. I looked out at the vineyard, where Emily was laughing with Rosa, her voice carrying across the rows. For the first time, I didn't just feel defensive. I felt ready. David thought he could erase me. He thought grief made me soft, pliable. But he had forgotten one thing. Margaret had planned for this, and she had left me with both shield and sword. The reckoning was coming. And this time, I would not wait quietly. Autumn settled over Sonoma like a warm quilt. The vines turned gold. The air crisp with the promise of harvest. I stood on the porch of the vineyard house, watching Emily chase a stray cat across the yard, her laughter rising like music I hadn't heard in years. For once, the land felt not just like Margaret's secret. It felt like mine too. But peace demanded action. Elena arrived one morning, her briefcase heavy with papers. She set them on the kitchen table, next to Margaret's journals and the steaming mugs Rosa had just poured. "Richard," she said, sliding the top document toward me. "This trust can be extended. We can move the vineyard into Emily's name under conditional guardianship. She'll have full rights when she turns 21. Until then, you oversee everything. It ensures David and Naomi can never touch it." I signed slowly. Each stroke of the pen, a declaration. Emily, wide-eyed, asked, "So this is mine?" "Yes," I said, my throat tight. "But it comes with rules. 3 of them." She leaned closer, listening. "First, you do not use this land or its money to rescue your parents. They made their choices. You cannot fix their hunger. Second, you use it for your education, your future. Third, you guard it as your grandmother meant it to protect love, not greed." Emily nodded solemnly. "I promise." That evening, Claire returned alone. She looked older than her years, her hands shaking as she clutched a crumpled envelope. "Dad," she whispered, "David's debts are out of control. Loan sharks. Lawsuits. Naomi's disappeared half the time. He's drowning." I met her eyes. "And you?" "I am trying," she said. "I want to be better. I don't want to lose Emily. I don't want to lose you." I placed a hand on hers. "Then start by telling the truth. Every time. No more stolen envelopes. No more silence." She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. The reckoning for David came swiftly. News broke of his forged loan documents, his attempt to use my Pasadena house as collateral. His creditors circled like vultures, and soon his reputation in Los Angeles was shredded. He called me, voice sharp with desperation. "Dad, you have to help me. Just a loan. Just until I can." "No," I said firmly. "I will not pay for the fire you lit yourself." "You're choosing Emily over me?" he spat. "I am choosing the one who has not betrayed me," I answered. And then I hung up. Weeks passed. Claire began visiting the vineyard regularly, sometimes with Emily, sometimes alone. She helped Rosa with harvest, her hands stained purple from grapes. Each time she came, she looked a little less like David's echo and a little more like herself. On the day of the harvest festival, we stood among the barrels, the air rich with fermenting wine. Emily raised a glass of sparkling cider, her smile radiant. "To Grandma Margaret," she said, "for giving us more than we ever knew." We clinked glasses, the sound ringing like a promise. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat on the porch alone. The vineyard stretched under the stars, a quilt of shadows and light. I thought of Margaret, her careful planning, her quiet strength, her unwavering faith that love could outlast betrayal. Justice, I realized, wasn't the courtroom gavel or the bank's notarized stamp. Justice was this moment, Emily safe, The vineyard thriving, Claire trying to heal, and David forced to confront the weight of his own choices. I breathed in the night air, the scent of earth and grapes, and whispered, "We made it. Margaret. You and I. We made it." The lesson was clear. Family can wound deeper than strangers, but foresight and love are stronger than greed. Betrayal can strip away illusions, but it cannot erase what is rooted in truth. Justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's as quiet as vines growing under the stars, as steady as a granddaughter's hand in yours. And sometimes, it is simply the peace of knowing you have not been erased.